Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. Coworkers randomly despawned for almost half an hour. By triggernometrey. Sorry for the big, stupid lead-up. I promise, it's relevant. I work at a distribution center / packing plant for an advertising company. Basically, it means I stand at a table and pack boxes full of paper all day, printing the shipping labels and stuff like that. It's a decent job, and I like my coworkers, so it's not really as boring as it sounds. The warehouse is about 2,000 square feet and is more or less a giant cinder block rectangle. There are very few windows. There is an office-type area along the east side, contains the break room, unisex bathroom, a cubicle for our IT guy, nothing else. And the stack / where we park the forklift and the pallet jacks are on the west side. The stacks are all either short enough to see over or empty enough to see through. The rest of the warehouse floor is visibly open space with the receiving bay, garage where the FedEx trucks come in. On the north end, and my station's on the south end. I have 5 coworkers. I'll call them Mary, Josh, Matt, Alex, and Joe. Mary works at the station next to me, building the kits and packing the boxes. Josh and Matt work in the stacks, scanning our materials for Mary and I to pick. Alex is the aforementioned IT guy. Joe is the floor manager and my direct boss. One of the perks of the job is that since the work is kind of mindless and nobody really talks to me, they're all older than me by a significant amount. I get to listen to music while I work. I have a kind of irritating and loud taste, so I wear a pair of earbuds to listen. Also, because Joe keeps sports talk radio on all day on the floor. But whatever. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my station, standing facing south. I was pre-building some boxes for a packing order we were going to have coming in later that week. So, I had my music a little louder than usual to cover up the sound of the tape gun. I could see Mary out of the corner of my eyes working on something at the next station. And whenever I lifted my head, I could see both Josh and Matt were in the stacks with their scanner guns and carts. Alex was in his office as far as I knew, and I couldn't see Joe. I built another stack of 10 or so boxes. Took me maybe 6 or 7 minutes before leaving to use the bathroom. I went into the little office space and noticed that Alex wasn't there, but wasn't really focused on it. I entered the bathroom, did my thing, and left. When I got out of the bathroom, Alex was still gone. I didn't think much of it. I knew he couldn't be in the bathroom since I would have seen him come in. But I guess I assumed he'd gone out onto the floor to ask someone a question or something. The office space where the bathroom is so small that you can see all of it from the entrance. So he couldn't have been in there without me seeing him. I walked out of the office back to my station and picked up my stuff to get back to work when I noticed that Mary was also gone, along with her water bottle and the roll of label stickers she had been using. I looked around towards the stacks for Matt and Josh. They're both over 6 feet tall and incredibly easily visible, normally. But I couldn't see them or their carts. I took off my earbuds and noticed that the warehouse was completely silent. No delivery trucks idling in the receiving bay, no rumble of cartwheels or footsteps on the concrete, and even my boss's radio was turned off. I left my station and walked across the floor, the motion-activated lights turning back on as I went, trying to look closer into the stacks to see if they were just out of view. But like I said, the warehouse isn't that big and they just weren't there. I never saw Mary, Alex, or Joe either, nor any of their stuff. The scanner guns or carts or label stickers. It was like I just imagined them all being at work today. I left the stacks and checked out the receiving bay. Nothing, and none of the garage doors were open. Break room, also nothing. It was around 3 p.m. Everyone eats at around noon and we all clock out at 4. So they hadn't all somehow gone for lunch without me noticing. By this point, I'd done a complete loop of the entire warehouse, outright calling out people as I went, and all my coworkers just seemed to have fallen off the face of the earth. Obviously, I was creeped out, but I'd be leaving in less than an hour anyway, so I just kinda got back to work. I put my music back on and went back to building boxes. Turned my music up loud just to have the noise. It felt like the sound of my tape gun was the only thing on the planet. I kept my eyes on my watch and eventually, after around 25 minutes, I finally noticed movement in the corner of my eye and looked up to see Mary at her station, working on her label stickers like she never left. I turned to face the stacks and saw Matt and Josh with their carts, right where they were before I had gone into the office. Nobody looked like they had spent the last half hour working, but they also didn't look like they actually had gone anywhere either. I didn't say anything about it, just spent the last drags of my shift with this weird feeling in the back of my neck. Eventually, 4 rolled around and I clocked out and left. I told all this to my stepdad on the way home. He works at the corporate office of the ad agency that owns my warehouse, a couple streets down. And he said he couldn't think of any reason for anyone to just up and leave like that. It hasn't happened since, at work or otherwise. I do keep my music volume a little lower while I work now, though. I can't help but wonder if something happened and I just couldn't hear it. Sorry, but wages are a privilege, the corrupt boss said, mocking his subordinates. As the enraged workers dragged him towards the window, leading to a 900-foot drop, one of the workers said, "Being able to live a long life is also a privilege." Woman Enters Twice by Lawrence. Narrated by As the Raven Dreams.
I have a weird glitch that happened to myself at work, and one of my coworkers was there and witnessed it. Obvious disclaimer, neither of us does drugs, we were both of sound mind, and neither of us had been drinking, and in fact we were both actually at work at the time. We work for a convenience store, and we both work the overnight shift. That may not sound important, but it is. On the overnight shift, you don't see a whole lot of people. When you see someone walk in, you kind of make note of them, because they're probably going to be the only customers that you see for that hour. This happened on the night before New Year's Eve, and as stated, I was working with my coworker, Michael. We were cleaning up the store and restocking the coolers when I heard the door chime that indicated that someone had entered the store. Michael and I quickly turned around to greet the person, and I saw an older woman with a purple coat and a small dog with curly hair. I made a quick comment that we don't normally let dogs in the store, since we do technically serve food, but at this point the rollers were off, and I just told her that so long as she didn't let the dog on the floor, I didn't mind if she brought him in. She agreed and walked into the store to do her shopping. I then turned to Mike, making a comment about how it was a cute dog, and he made a comment about what breed it was, and that was that. I went back to stalking with Mike, and after a few moments, I looked around to see if the woman was somewhere in the store, and I couldn't see her. I thought it was weird, but it was possible that she had just gone to the restroom and left. We were one of the only 24-hour stores around, and if she was on the road late, she may have just stopped really quickly to go. It does happen. We finish up the stocking, and we both head back to the main step-up where the registers are to check off the list and see if the boss had left any special cleaning instructions. As soon as we get up to the front, I look up and see an older woman walk in the front door with the purple coat and that same little dog. I was kind of taken aback, thinking it's weird that she came back so quickly, but as she walked in, she asked if she was allowed to bring the dog in. I mentioned that, so long as she didn't let him on the floor and kept a hold of him, I didn't mind. I said this almost as if I wasn't controlling myself, like I was forced to say it, like the situation required me to say it. She smiled, said thank you, and walked into the store to do her shopping. I looked over at Mike and I asked him if that was the same woman as before, and he said that it definitely looked like her. He then mentioned that maybe she just forgot something, or maybe she had something wrong with her memory. After a few moments, she walked up to the counter with a few things and placed them down. As I was scanning them, I asked her if she had just forgotten to buy them when she was in earlier. She then responds by saying that she wasn't in earlier. And when I mentioned that I thought she had come in about 20 minutes prior, she tells me that she's on a long drive from up north, and that 20 minutes prior she was on the highway. I just kind of nod and agree, and make a joke about how there was a lady that looked just like her, with a similar dog that came in earlier. We just chuckled about the whole thing. It was incredibly awkward, I'm not going to lie. After she left, I actually sat down at the security computer and pulled the footage back, thinking that maybe it was just someone similar looking with the same dog, but that's when it got weirder. The footage for that exact moment showed that nobody had entered the store at all. I knew the approximate time that she had entered. I remember seeing her and her dog, making the comments, talking to Mike about her. He even remembers seeing her, and he thought it was weird that she came back. But according to the woman in the security footage, she hadn't been there. In fact, nobody had entered the store for around an hour before she showed up that second time. I don't know if we just saw a future event, or if it was like a time reset or something, but it was freaky. Beyond our memories of her, that first woman, or I guess the first time the woman came in, just didn't happen. She didn't purchase anything, so there was no transaction history. The cameras didn't show anyone, and unfortunately where we were stalking, which would be where I was standing when I mentioned she could bring her dog in the first time, is off camera. So I don't even know if I actually stood up and made that comment to anyone. It was crazy, and it kind of gives me goosebumps thinking about it. But in the end, I guess that it's just another one of those things that happens while working retail in a simulation.
My husband screamed at me repeatedly about how I need to just let it go, that I always held on too tightly to things, and that if I didn't change, he was going to leave me once and for all. The memory flashed through my mind as I desperately held his hand while he dangled over the edge of the bridge. And so, like he had suggested after his affair, I simply just let it go. New Path Out of the Woods by Anonymoose. This happened about a year ago. I was going hiking by myself in a local area. It wasn't difficult, and I had been there before, just not on this path. Even though it was easy, I took too long and had to turn around instead of finishing the loop to beat the sunset. Emphasis on it being a loop. There was a path marked with bright trail paint, and I followed it back to the trailhead. There were just a few random branches of trails that connected the loop to itself, but I recognized all of them, as they had a large map board, and never once felt like I could be lost. Sun started to set though, and I still wasn't back to where the trail began. I was worried I had somehow missed the opening, a giant sign/opening in the trees, and ended up on the other side of the loop, so I turned around and walked a short distance back. After walking a tiny way back, I stumbled upon an opening as I described, a very large break in trees, huge map sign. I felt incredibly discombobulated that I could miss it, but I just was glad to be out. However, my car wasn't there. This is a tiny nature park area in a city where there's one entrance to the loop that is just a break in the trees. The trailhead is just between 10 yards of playground/green space from the parking lot of 4 parking spaces, then a road. I was freaking out thinking my car had gotten stolen to the point I almost called the police. My phone had no service though. I started walking on the actual road in this area out of deep confusion/fear of it becoming night. I double-checked the trailhead to see if it was the same or if I had gotten off path. Again, I couldn't find any evidence I was somewhere new or a different trail. I continued walking down the road and I passed a small line of trees that showed an exact replica of the parking lot I had just walked from, except my car was actually there. Of course, I was just relieved and feeling stupid, so I went home. To visualize what I saw when I walked, imagine the road as a B shape, with 2 curves being the parking lots and the middle line being the trees, and the first lines being the road. Something felt weird all night though, so I drove back to the daylight the next day. There was only one parking lot. There was only one trailhead. I completely walked the trail this time, the whole loop, and I couldn't find any other trailhead or playground. I drove the entire road and around the natural park. Not a single park similar to where I was. Should be noted that this was a very clean, well-marked loop for beginners. I looked at a map of all the trails and none of them were close enough to this loop for me to even stumble upon them, and that's pretending there are 2 trailheads to find. I don't even believe in the Matrix theory, but I really felt like a character walking through a game that's glitching and making copies of buildings. I'm not spiritual either, but even my religious friends I've told have made conspiracies that some higher power was protecting me by getting me out of the woods. A tourist approached me today and asked me if I could show him the way to the city park. And out of panic, I pointed in a random direction and quickly left. I froze in horror as soon as I saw the same guy on a missing person posters the very next day. Flowers for Norma by Jenna F. Narrated by As the Raven Dreams.
Before I get into this glitch story, I want to say that I've been haunted by weird things pretty much my entire life. I may share some of my other stories with you at some point, but I have seriously had to deal with weird things happening to me since I was a child. They haven't always been glitches. Some of them have been pretty obviously paranormal, but these weird events are always the ones that get to me. This specific event is just the most recent one to happen to me, and it's one that seems to be the biggest change in my reality. I've been a delivery driver for a store that does floral arrangements for quite a few years now. I also help put together the arrangements, help out in the store, but my main job is deliveries. It may sound like a bit of a weird job and one that most people wouldn't think to be a busy job, but funeral homes order their flower arrangements from somewhere, and there are funerals every day. So I can tell you that we do get a lot of business. On top of that, some businesses like to order small arrangements for their front desks, And we also had one client that had been consistent for years. She's actually the one that the story is about. But I want to tell you a bit more about her before we get into the story. Norma Jean was, at the time of this story, in her mid-90s. I think she was 94 to be exact, but I can't be certain on that. Norma had been getting flowers from our shop for 25 years, almost the entire time the store had done deliveries, and that started because her husband had wanted to get her flowers, and he'd actually contacted the original owner of the store to set up an arrangement for them to be delivered every 2 weeks to Norma. He hadn't prepaid or anything. He was paying when they were set up and sent out. But he had done this for about 20 years, until he passed away in 2016. Her husband had actually spoken to the owner not too long before he passed away, and asked if there was any way he could continue to have the flowers sent to her after his passing. If maybe there was some way he could prepay, and the owner promised him that she would continue sending them, and that he didn't have to worry about paying for them. I'm mentioning this because this was, obviously, the sweetest and saddest story that I've ever heard, and I was always so happy when the 2 weeks was up, and I got to deliver more flowers to Norma Jean. It was always such a pleasure to knock on her door and say, "I have a flower delivery for Norma Jean from Ronald," because her eyes would always light up when I said it. Now, I've been making this delivery, as mentioned, every 2 weeks for about 4 years, with some exceptions for when I was out sick or just not working that day. If you do the math on that, I've done this delivery approximately 180 times. So, I know Norma Jean pretty well. Over the past couple of years, I will say that she changed a slight bit, and that she wasn't very talkative anymore. She would just take her flowers and say thank you, and that would be the whole conversation. It's okay, I get it. With everything going on, it was possible that she just didn't want to be social, and I respected that. Now, on to the glitch that happened. About 2 months ago, it was time for me to do my delivery to Norma Jean. I got the flowers arranged, got everything in the van, and I headed toward her lovely little house so that I could make her morning better. However, when I pulled up, I noticed that her front yard looked different. For some reason, I couldn't really put words to what was different. And part of me thinks that this may be part of the glitch. Something about it was different, but my brain cannot, for whatever reason, parse out the information on what exactly is different. It's just that something is completely wrong with how it looks. I shook this off, thinking that it was just something weird at first, but then I got up to the door and rang the bell. An older woman, younger than Norma, with curly, graying red hair, answered the door. My first thought was that this could have been Norma Jean's daughter or something. I've never met any of her kids, but she had mentioned them in the past. Of course, my mind immediately went to the worst place. I thought maybe something had happened to Norma and her kids were there to help her, or worse. I went ahead with my normal greeting of flower delivery for Norma Jean from Ronald, and the woman lit up just as Norma would have. She reached out for the flowers, and she said that they were absolutely lovely this week and thanked me for always being so kind when I dropped them off. I then asked if Norma was around or if she was okay, and this woman looked at me like I was crazy. She kind of shook her head and said, "What do you mean? I'm right here." This woman was at least 15 years younger than Norma. There was no way that she was in her 90s, and she looked nothing like I remember Norma looking. On top of that, Her voice was way more energetic, and she was way more talkative. I even questioned her a bit, saying, "Wait, you're Norma?" And she started asking me if I was okay. She'd mentioned that I'd been bringing her flowers for something like 4 years now, and she was confused why I didn't recognize her on that day. I told her that I just must be off and that I was fine. I tried to play it off as best I could, but I could tell that she was confused as to what I was going on about. I told her to have a lovely day, and I went back to my van and headed back to the shop. As soon as I got back, I mentioned to the owner that someone else had answered the door for Norma, and that she said she was Norma. We talked about it for a bit. I described the woman, and she told me that the woman that answered the door was, in fact, Norma. I then mentioned the little old lady that I was used to seeing, and she was confused, because based on the description that I was giving, I was talking about Norma's mother. I said that I must have been giving the flowers to her mother the whole time then, and she then mentioned to me that that was impossible, because Norma's mother died in 1997, which was when the owner met Ronald and Norma. She did the entire flower arrangement for the funeral. That was how the store had actually gotten Ronald's business. He thought that the arrangements were so beautiful that he wanted to get the flowers for Norma Jean to try to keep her in high spirits after the passing of her mother. She even showed me a picture that she had of them from a year or two later, and the woman in the photograph looked a lot closer to this new Norma Jean that I had met that day. So, I guess that's my latest glitch. The Norma Jean that I knew was apparently somehow Norma Jean's mother, and not the real Norma. But the woman that's been answering the door to me for the last 4 years has been dead since the late 90s. I really don't know how to explain this beyond it being a really weird shift in reality, or glitch, or something. But it's probably one of the weirdest things that I've ever experienced, and I really don't know how to take it. I will add that I have done this delivery a couple more times since this change, and this new Norma is very kind. And she knows me by name, she knows my girlfriend's name, and several other things about me that I've spoken about to Norma. So, I have to believe that this is the Norma Jean that I've been delivering to for a few years now. I have no explanation for this, and I'm open to any comments. But, as it is now, I just have to accept that the Norma Jean I knew is no longer with us. And just keep bringing the flowers to this new Norma Jean.
Six friends, delirious and exhausted, had finally found the trail and are on their way back to the car after being lost in the wilderness for days. He's not sure which of them is an imposter or how they've woven themselves into his memories, but he knows the car can only fit 5 people. Did I Die and Come Back to Life? By Idontlikecheesy. I know the title sounds a little clickbait, but I'm here for possible answers. Please excuse if this is poorly explained. A lot runs through my mind at once when I talk about this, and it's hard to lay it out in an order that makes sense to other people. Additionally, I'm not 100% sure this is the correct subreddit for this, so if anyone knows a better one and could direct me to it, I'd be grateful. Anyways, this has been on my mind a lot lately. I'm currently a senior in high school, and this happened last school year. I used to be a very reckless driver. I got pulled over going 20 over in the school zone. And that's where this story starts. Naturally, my parents took my license for 2 weeks. when I got my license back, it was conveniently the first day of spring break. My friend had gotten a new truck and he wouldn't send me pictures of it. He said we need to see it in person. Now me and this friend live about a half an hour from the rest of our friend group, so I said I was going to drive to his house and see his new truck, which I did. Now, it should be noted that we live in the country, so we take a lot of back roads to get to places with loose gravel and dirt. So I hopped in my car and put on some music on my Bluetooth FM transmitter. If you don't know what that is, it's a plug into your car's cigarette lighter and tells you which radio station to switch to, and it plays music from your phone onto your car's speakers. Now, I distinctly remember turning on Sunday Morning Comin' Down by Johnny Cash. So, me being stupid with Need for Speed, I was flying going 60 miles an hour down these back roads. I ended up trying to drift and kept messing it up, and that's where what I remember doesn't align with what exactly happened. Here's what I remember. I remember my car losing control and feeling the right side lift up. I proceeded to start rolling and I felt the roof starting to close in. I distinctly remember a few things from this moment. First of all, I remember putting my hands up trying to push the roof off my head and screaming, "Oh shit," 3 times. I also remember not being able to see out the windshields because of how cracked they were and the cloud of gravel dust my car had kicked up. And another thing I remember is hearing glass cracking and scraping in my back seat, but being too scared to look back because I had an eye on the road mentally. Then, I remember looking up and the roof caving in, and it went black. Then what happened after that I can't explain. My vision was blocked by what I can only describe as TV static. My ears were ringing bad, like I couldn't even think. Then the ringing got interrupted by radio static. After a few moments the static dispersed and I was extremely confused for a few reasons. First, my car was upright and intact. I had just barely bumped a tree. The radio static was coming from my radio. My FM transmitter had somehow been removed from the cigarette lighter. I checked my phone and no music was playing. The music app wasn't even open. It was almost like I was switching through the stations and couldn't find something to listen to. Well, lucky for me, there was a farmer in the field next to where I crashed and he came and helped me. And here's what he said happened. I was barreling around this turn going about 60 miles per hour and my tire popped off after I started to drift, which I later concluded was due to low air pressure. And I couldn't straighten and hit the tree. He said I was lucky, because if I was off by even 6 inches, I would have rolled into the creek and died. A few hours later, after everything got settled, I finally got home and felt so different. I guess anyone would, but everything felt so unfamiliar. Like I was in a stranger's house. I felt unsafe telling anyone that I felt that way. I mean, the crash was 8 months ago and I still get paranoid just typing it out. I've also noticed some things are different around the house that no one else thinks are different. For example, light switch placements are different than I remember. Also, the hot water and cold water knobs are switched. It used to be cold on the left and hot on the right, but now it's the opposite. And that's all. If you made it to the end, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. I know it was pretty long. Thoughts on what happened would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again. I'm so sorry. I spoke before I spat on the frozen grave of my father again. Shut up, said my brother. If you don't get coal this Christmas, the winter will take Mommy too. Time Disappeared by Anonymoose, narrated by As the Raven Dreams.
I recently started a new job, and I've made it a point to be early to the office every single day. For some people, this may seem a bit weird, but this is my first career-level position, so I'm really trying to make a good impression, and make it obvious that I really want this job. The company that I work for is fairly laid back, but I have a bit of a different mentality. I want to be an ideal employee, and I want to be seen as someone that is trying really hard. I know that this is probably a fruitless effort, but I don't care. I'm doing what I can. Obviously, I'm a bit obsessive with things, and as such, I have a very strict morning routine. I wake up at 5:30, I get a shower in, and I get everything done and ready for the day, and then I'm out of the house by 6:05 to 6:10. Leaving at these times gets me to the office by 6:40 at the latest, which puts me at 20 minutes early for the start of my 7 a.m. shift. This gives me time to get my station set up, get coffee, and get everything going in the mornings. I've worked there for about 2 months, and I have been at the office at this time every single day for the entire time that I've worked there. So it has absolutely become a habit. That leads to the day that the glitch happened. It was about 2 weeks ago as of the time of me writing this. On this morning, I actually woke up around 5:15 because I kept having some really weird nightmares, which was fine by me. Waking up early meant that I had even more time to get my day started. I get out of bed, get a quick shower in, and I do all of the things that I need to before I leave. By the time I finish up, I look over at my cell phone and it's only 6 a.m. on the dot. I figure that I've done everything I could at that point at home, so I get out and head to work. But this is where things get weird. I got in my car and the clock on my dashboard said 6:02 a.m. I pull out of the driveway and up to the stop sign at the end of my road, and then turn on the main road towards my office. As soon as I turn onto the main road, my phone starts ringing. I see that my boss is calling me, so I answer. I ask him what's up, and he responds with, "Is everything okay? Are you coming in?" I was kind of confused, as I was actually leaving earlier than normal. So I said, "Yeah, I'm on my way now. What's going on?" He then responds with, "Okay, I was just making sure. We were about to start the morning huddle, and you're usually here by now, and we hadn't heard from you yet." It was at this point that I looked back at the clock in my car, 7:15 a.m. I apologize to my manager, and I tell him that I must have lost track of time this morning and that I would be there in 5 minutes. He says it's fine and to just get there safely. We hang up, and I just kind of stared at the clock while I drove, trying to figure out how exactly that happened. There was no way that I was wrong about the time that I woke up. I was up early. I had actually turned off my alarm after I'd woken up because I didn't want it going off while I was in the shower. I got out and got finished, and I was absolutely without a shadow of a doubt on the road by 6:02. I saw those numbers on my phone and the clock in my car. I had only been driving for a couple of minutes by the time that he called, but somehow, an hour and 13 minutes had passed. I have no idea what happened in this time. I didn't feel like I passed out, nothing really changed around me, and I didn't feel weird. It's just that the time vanished. To the best of my knowledge, I don't have anything medically wrong with me, so I cannot make any sense of it. It's just one of those crazy and terrifying things that happened, and thankfully it only happened once because I don't want to be late again.
I spotted some Jehovah's Witnesses wandering my neighborhood in the pouring rain, and decided to invite them inside so they could dry off. It was only as her smiles widened and I noticed the elongated sizers that I realized why they always ask people if they can come inside. My cousin came to visit, but something was wrong with her. By baerbelx. Hello, so I hope this isn't the right place to post this, and I would like to apologize for my poor English before we start. It is a story that still haunts me to this day. What I want to tell you about happened like half a year ago. It's about me, a female 20, my cousin, female 36, and my grandma, female 66, if any of this matters. I grew up with my grandma, and my cousin is actually the second closest person I have in my life since day one. She lives a few towns away, but she comes over and visits me and my grandma at least once a month. Since I can remember, it has never been any different than that. And when she would come over, she would always text or call me first, ask to get a coffee ready. When I was a child, she called my grandma first. She would never come without informing us before. As soon as she's at our door, it's always the same, like a little ritual. I open the door, she hugs me, puts her bag down and takes her jacket off, and then goes to the living room to hug my grandma. That in mind, let's go a few months back in time. It was a regular day in the afternoon when our doorbell rang. I didn't really know who it was, but I assumed it was the package delivery driver asking me to take a package from my neighbor in, or something like that. So I looked out the window. We live on the 3rd floor of the most stereotypical East German looking flat ever. I really have to lean out to see who's there. And I saw that it was my cousin. I was pretty happy to see her, but already surprised that she came over without calling before. I opened the door and let her in. But instead of hugging me, she walked straight past me and sat down in the living room. She didn't put her bag down, because, weird enough, she didn't even bring her bag. My grandmother had the same reaction as me, happy about the visit, but kind of surprised. But it just got weirder. For like an hour, we talked about the usual stuff, what's new, how is everyone, etc. At some point in the conversation, we brought up her brother's car, and she acted all surprised. She said that he doesn't have a car and that she can't even remember him having a license. Which is weird because she helped him get and choose that car not too long ago. And she told us about that before when her brother was with her. Even after he told her that, she swore she can't remember. By her tone, we knew she wasn't kidding. Overall, she isn't the person who would do stuff like this just to mess with us. After 2 or 3 hours, she said she had to go home because there was work tomorrow. She stood up, walked straight out the door, and left. I looked out the window to wave her goodbye. We always do this. But she didn't even look up. My grandma and I both agreed this was the strangest visit ever, and that we're going to have to ask her about it next time she comes over. A few weeks forward, and she called as usual, saying she would come over. So I got coffee ready, and when she was at our apartment, everything was the same as always. She came in, hugged me, put the bag down, etc. As soon as she sat down, we agreed to ask her about the last time, and she knew nothing. Like that didn't happen in her memory. When we asked her when she was here last, she said a month ago. But the weird visit was like 2 weeks ago. When we asked her what we were talking about when she was here the last time, she said all the stuff from the time she was here a month ago, and not that last time. She thought we were kidding her, or trying to mess with her, but we were just so confused. She still doesn't remember this day. P.S. None of us were under the influence of alcohol, substances, or anything like that. I may have enjoyed the alcohol package on the cruise ship a bit too much, I thought as I leaned over the side of the barrier to vomit. Now, desperately treading water and watching the ship leave me behind in the dark, silent ocean, I suddenly feel shockingly sober. Teleporting Telephone by MG. I have a glitch that happened to me the other day that I can't seem to get over. I know that sounds dumb, but it's eating at me and I'm personally struggling to move past it because it makes no sense and I don't understand how or what exactly happened. I don't want to drag this on too long, so I'll get right to it with very little in the way of context here. The only thing that I can think that you need to know is that I'm 17. I live with my parents, and I do not have my phone charger near my bed. I know that, to some people, that may sound weird, but I've been trying to peel myself away from my phone a bit since being a teenager in the modern times has me a bit too attached to my screen. And I read that it's a good way to do this is to have a place to charge your phone that is away from where you can reach it. So, because of this, I have my charger on my dresser, which is over by my door, on the opposite end of my room from my bed. If I need to use my phone for whatever reason while it's charging, I have to get up, walk around 6 full steps to my door, and use it over at the dresser. It's actually done a good job at getting me to use my phone less, if anyone cares. Anyways, the other day I was in my room doing my homework when my dad knocks and comes into my room. I asked him what's up. He asked me if I had seen his text that he had sent me. He calmly sends me messages with quick questions if he's feeling too lazy to come upstairs and ask me. I said that I hadn't seen them, because I was nose down, and I grabbed my phone from where it was sitting on my nightstand. I opened the text and read it. It was just him asking what I want for dinner, and he also sent me some silly meme gifs. I chuckled at the meme and then told him that I was open to whatever he and mom were going to make, that I didn't have anything specific. He stood there at my door and we chatted about a few things. He asked me about my homework. I mentioned that it was for my economics class and it was pretty easy, but that I was just really focused. He asked me about other stuff about school, and we just had a bit of a quick chat, nothing too crazy. As he was about to leave my room, I started to hear the sound of my phone vibrating like it was getting a call. I looked down at my bed where I thought I had tossed it, but I couldn't find it. My dad looks over at my dresser and makes a snide comment about how it's my boyfriend. He then picks up my phone from my dresser, unplugs it, and walks it over to hand it over to me, and says that he'll let me know when dinner was ready, and left. I just held my phone and tried to figure out how it ended up plugged in on my dresser. It made no sense. I had just looked at it when my dad entered the room to see the meme and respond to his question, yet when my boyfriend called, it was over on my dresser and plugged in. Also, I was the only one between the two of us that realized that something was off. When I mentioned it to my dad, he kind of just shook his head and said that he thought it was on my dresser the whole time. I mentioned that I had read his text and replied to it when he was up there, and he says that he actually asked the question when he came in, and that he doesn't recall me having my phone. It was really weird. I swear I looked at the text and the meme because I knew what the picture was. I remember what it all was, but I had somehow not seen it prior to when he handed me the phone. It was like my phone teleported to the dresser, but also reset the timeline to make it that it was always over there? I really don't know what happened, but I'm very open to interpretations from your listeners, because it was freaky. I thank the woman profusely for letting me take refuge in our home from my husband. I only screamed in terror after realizing he got there first. My girlfriend and I saw my pen materialize and fall right between us. By the Groove Freak. I've just recently found this sub, but I've been experiencing difficult to explain or unexplainable insofar as I'm able to theorize events for much of my life. This is especially true for things that I lose or that fall into the void, as I nostalgically like to refer to it. So anyways, this happened to me just a couple months ago. My girlfriend and I were working on something together. We are both writers. I'm also a musician, and we collaborate on creative ideas sometimes. We were sitting at my desk and taking down some notes, trying to outline a working plan for us to follow with this particular endeavor. We both prefer to do this the old-fashioned way and physically write things down, so I'm using a pen and literally mid-word when I feel like I've totally forgotten my train of thought. So I stop writing for a second and look up from my notepad, still holding the pen. When, a few seconds later, I realign my thoughts and look down to continue writing, but the pen's gone. The only other things on the table were my notepad and my girlfriend's pen and her notepad. It's not a large table either. So I say, WTF, where's my pen? We take everything else off the table. Now there's just nothing on it. Okay, so I suppose maybe somehow I dropped it and didn't notice it leave my hand. I look on the floor and all around the desk, and of course not there. So I say, well, I guess it just fell into the void. Because things like this happen relatively often, though most can be rationalized away and ignored because of the sliver of uncertainty and the unreliability of human senses and memory. What we do next is move the table over a couple feet, in case the pen had not only fallen from my hand and onto the floor without me feeling it, or producing any audible noise, but also rolled in such a way as to be perfectly hidden under one of the legs of the table. This also wasn't the case, but my girlfriend and I got on our knees, looking more floor level all around for it. This is when it happened. As we are both facing each other, right between us, we both watch as the pen just, and I can't stress this enough, appears. Literally materializes in midair in the space between us and proceeds to fall to the floor. Naturally, we are both stunned for a moment and totally speechless, but given the mild frequency that unexplainable shit has happened to us both, coupled with the fact that we are both already inclined towards contemplating and discussing esoteric or abstract hypothesis concepts, perhaps we were slightly more equipped than some others to accept this kind of almost unbelievable event. Of course, I'd be skeptical too if it were anyone besides myself, or even if it were me without someone else to corroborate. But it definitely happened, and we both saw it. At my therapist's urging, I finally opened up to my girlfriend of 3 years about my insecurities and fears. 2 days later, I got an alert about a viral TikTok with video clip of me crying and her mocking me for being weak. Two of my glasses glitched in the same month. By Anonymoose. Few weeks ago, I stayed with a couple of my friends. I remember having my sunglasses with me when I left the next day on my way to my car. The sun was hitting my eyes and I used them. In the car, I switched my glasses to see better and could never find my sunglasses again. Looked in my bags, my car, my pockets, and nothing. I concluded that I must have dropped them somewhere. It was my favorite, the one which had the most protection. I was pretty upset, but initially I let it go. 1 week after that, me and my boyfriend stayed in an Airbnb. Even though I lost my sunglasses, my other glasses were with me. I really don't go anywhere without them. I can see without them, but reading subtitles becomes almost impossible. When we arrived, I clearly remember putting them right next to the TV. And a few hours in, when I go looking for them, they are gone. So I'm thinking, maybe I misremembered and they are in my car, or I never took them out, even though I remember otherwise. So I started looking everywhere. I have already lost my sunglasses at this point, and this one is more vital to me. I need to drive the next day, and we were having a movie night. I looked under the bed, on the floors, on the couches, my bags, clothing, everywhere. The Airbnb was just a one-room small apartment. At that moment, I let it go. At night, I was visibly uncomfortable while watching the movie, so my boyfriend got my car keys and went ahead and looked. At the same time, I checked everything again to make sure. He came back empty-handed, so once again, I thought to myself, I must have dropped them. The next day, after we had breakfast, I go into the room, and to my surprise, my glasses are next to the bed on the floor. It didn't look like they were dropped. It was as if someone put them there. I asked my boyfriend. He shrugged and told me I must have dropped them there. Yet I clearly looked even under the bed. I had an off feeling about it, but I let it go. A few weeks later, today, in my drawer next to my other sunglasses, I see my missing sunglasses. It's just there. I live with my mom, and she knew I lost my sunglasses, so I thought maybe she found them and put them back. But no, she said she never saw them after I lost them. I thought of the possibility of my boyfriend pranking me, but then again, he didn't come over to my room for at least 2 weeks. And I swear those sunglasses weren't there in that time. I would have worn them instead, and the drawer I'm talking about has a glass on top layer for accessories and things like that. So the inside is always visible and not deep. As I lay down on my bed and got ready to turn in, I felt 2 bloody, pale hands grab my ankles from under the bed. Perhaps I didn't beat the girl into a consciousness enough, and the ropes I used were too weak. She's admirably quite resilient. And with that, my friends, our time together is coming to an end. That was 10 Glitch in the Matrix stories, just shy of 1 hour's worth. I wanted to do something extra this week since I had to take that week off, and this way you almost get 2 videos in one. And there was no way I would have done this without the help of As the Raven Dreams, who gave me those 3 extra stories that he told for you today. Thank you, Raven, as always, for helping me out. And of course, I would love to thank all the writers who let us read their stories today. And one of those stories was a submission for me as well. On my website, there is a way to submit stories either through email or you can do it through another form to be private if you want. And of course, those people who let me read their names or want to be anonymous, thank you for letting me read your stories. Without you guys, I really wouldn't have much of a channel. It's a great honor that you will let me bring your stories to life and maybe in front of new people that wouldn't have heard it otherwise. I hope every single one of you stay safe and don't glitch into another reality. I've heard that it's kind of jarring when that happens, and it seems it might have happened to a couple of you. Now, if you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And if you'd like to help this channel /podcast grow, please just share it with anyone who might enjoy it. You'd be absolutely surprised how much that helps. Now, if you like early access to the audio, or you'd like some extra stories, I have Patreon and memberships on YouTube where you get that, and some extra bonuses as well. I also have merch and PayPal if you just want to buy me a coffee or something. Now, last but never least, I would love a comment, but I gotta get you that Sunday word first. On screen right now is everyone who left me a comment using last week's word. Thank you guys as always. I really look forward to all this. And this week's word is going to be a bit odd. I just want to see what you're going to do with it. It's salmon. Just write me a comment down below and have the word salmon in it somehow, which, remember, salmon's also a color. And you'll be in next week's video/photo. If you're on the podcast, you can @ me on Twitter doing the same thing, and of course the same thing will happen for you. But as always, guys, thank you for watching and listening. It really means the world to me. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.